All right, welcome everyone to this information session. This is put on by an initiative at UCSD called My CS Ph.D. And the topic we're going to be focusing on today is all about applying to PhD programs, which is one of the most asked about topics on our website. And we get lots and lots of emails about that. So hopefully we'll be able to answer a bunch of your questions today. I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of introductions, and then we'll try to get into answering your questions as quickly as we can, so we have lots of time for that. So why are we doing this? So we're trying to answer your questions about getting a PhD in computer science. And the goal of the whole project of the My CS PhD project is to just provide good information. Everyone on this panel either has a PhD or is getting a PhD, so we're all kind of, I guess, probably pro-PhD. But mostly our goal is to get good information out there. And we started this because it's really hard to find good information online. There's a lot of answers out there. A lot of them are maybe not specific enough. They talk about PhDs in general. And it turns out that things are very different in different fields. So the process and standards and everything else about getting a PhD in, say, biology is very different than it is in computer science. So we'd like to provide information that's specific to getting a PhD in computer science. Some of the other information is too specific. It's about a particular program, which is really valuable once you have some offers or you're trying to decide where to apply. But it's also very specific. And some of it's just out of date and wrong. And so we'd like to kind of push back against some of that. And there's actually been some research that shows that if you get information from the people that are really involved with CS PhDs, which are professors and graduate students, that leads to the best decisions for undergraduates. There's better retention once you get into a PhD program because you've made a decision with good information. So that's why we're here. The way that this will work is that you folks that are attending, you submitted a whole bunch of questions when you signed up on Eventbrite. I put some of them onto the Slido site. You can join it on this URL with this event number. There's 2 rooms. There's actually 2 of these sessions going on at once. Make sure you're in the right room if you want to ask questions of this group of people about applying to PhD programs. And you can type in new questions and you can upvote questions that are there. And we're just going to go through those questions in order. And so go ahead and vote for what you'd like us to talk about. Here are the panelists we have today. We'll just go through and do some quick introductions. I'd like the panelists to tell us where you are right now, where you got your PhD if you already have one. And we'll just go through the list as they're on the slide here. So my name's Steve Swanson. I'm a professor at UC San Diego. I got my PhD at the University of Washington in Seattle, Washington. And that's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Talia Dudali. Right now, I'm a PhD candidate at Georgia Tech. My advisor is Ada Gabrilovska, and I work at the intersection of machine learning and systems. Originally, I come from Greece. I graduated from the National Technical University of Athens with my bachelor's degree, and then I joined Georgia Tech. And right now I was on the academic job market, and by fall, hopefully I will be faculty in one of the universities here. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm Sihan Liu. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Virginia. My advisor is Professor Samir Khan. My research mostly related to memory systems, process memory specifically. Before I started a PhD program, I did undergrad at the University of Michigan. That's about me.
Hey y'all, I'm a PhD student at Cornell. My research is in applied cryptography and computer security, and I did my undergrad at UC San Diego.
Hi, my name is Sriram. I am a professor at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. I got my PhD from Rice University. So we've got like 2 Texans here I see on this call. I'm originally from India. I'm Bangalore, and I'm primarily a programming languages and systems-ish researcher, but past decade, I've done a lot of work on computing education and their intersection. So I'm happy to talk about all that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emery Berger. I'm the other Texan, at least part-time Texan. So I did my graduate work at the University of Texas at Austin. Before that, I'm from Florida, and I went to the University of Miami as an undergrad. I'm currently at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, not in Fallingwater, as appearances may deceive. And my work is also mostly programming languages and systems, but I've also done stuff that's appeared in HCI conferences and security conferences and probably other kinds of conferences I'm forgetting right now. And also, I'm perhaps infamous these days for having created this website called csrankings.org, which we may end up talking about more.
Hi, everyone. My name is George Porter. I'm a professor here at UC San Diego, just down the hall from Steve. And my research work is on computer networking and computer systems. And for the last couple of years, I've been the chair of PhD admissions here in our program. And before that, I was a member of that committee as well. And yeah, thanks for the invitation to participate.
Great, and thank you guys all for being here. We all appreciate your time. So let's answer some questions. So we'll start off with a very popular question. How many PhD programs should I apply to, and how should I choose which ones to apply to?
All right, there's no good answer to this question. I would say it really depends a lot on where you are. If you're at a university that's already a research university and you're working with a professor there, you will get a lot more guidance through that, right? So for instance, if you have a very narrow focus, you specifically want to go into, say, cryptography, right? Applied cryptography, for instance, right? And you're already working with a professor who's roughly in that area. They will be able to give you a sense of like, what are the top schools? What are the not so top schools? Who are the good people? Where should you be applying? Apply to these, 6 places, right? If you're from a program that is sort of well-known and you have a strong record, you probably don't have to apply a whole lot of places. But at the end of the day, applying to a large number of places isn't going to help. What you need is applying to a focused set of places. And I'll stop there and let other people talk.
I can chime in and say that also consider that if you apply to a large number of places, there is also financial cost. Each application is around $100. Maybe some other people have better numbers, but it is a financial burden. So be very careful about the places you apply. Try to think the areas, the professors that are in this university. Try also to think about where you want to be in the world. Like, you want to come to the US, like which states do you want to be? Don't just apply randomly. So have a focused set of maybe less than 10 places, so that at the end of the day, if you get offers, maybe you can visit and make an informed decision. And that's from me. Yeah.
So in my experience, so I went to a very small liberal arts undergrad, and I really had no idea how well I was going to do on the application process. And so I applied to a lot of places. I think I applied to 15 graduate schools. And it was a lot of work, and there was back as when we had to use stamps to mail transcripts and stuff. So I think it depends on where you're going. I also would, Talia mentioned the application costs. Most places, if you have financial hardship, they will waive that. You can go and search on the website. It's more work, obviously.
They don't make it easy for you to find or like necessarily. So, but they will give it to you. Yeah. You just have to do the work.
That's right. And so I think, the higher your uncertainty about what you're going to do and where you're going to go and how well you're going to do, the more places you should apply to. Mechanically, it's not that hard, right? You just click submit more. It's the same essays. The applications are quite consistent.
One piece of advice I've given to a lot of students, when you're really applying to an advisor, not so much a school. And one way to figure out where good people to apply to is to do a little research ahead of time by going, look at the kind of research you want to do. You can ask people at your local institution, what are the big conferences? Like, what are the major venues, journals, conferences? And start reading the last 2-3 years worth of them and find out who's active, who's doing stuff, because it's not always the most sort of famous people that you want to work with. And so sometimes you're like, wow, that person they're working on something amazing. I should apply to them. I hadn't thought of them, but wow, they have several papers in the last couple of years on this topic. On the flip side, this can also be helpful because sometimes people you may think about applying to work with have transitioned to an administrative role, some kind of dean kind of thing, and so they haven't been publishing in the last 5-6 years. And so as a future researcher, they may not be a very good, potentially a very good advisor.
So the one slight pushback against that, George, is that works great for people who have a very clear sense of what their area is, and that often correlates well with the kind of people I was talking about, like you already have access to people doing research in the area, or access to those things. I think the tricky thing is for people who, like I went to a small college just like Steve did, and I didn't have access to those people. So I think that advice, has to be tempered a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
If you have if you have some area, for example, you can find out at least who are the people in that area who are working on a particular topic. At least it gives you some more information.
So I'll go ahead and put in my CS rankings piece right here. So, I mean, I built CS rankings to satisfy a need that basically I wish I had CS rankings around. So I came from an undergraduate institution, I mentioned, University of Miami, that simply didn't send people to graduate school. They all went off to industry. And I wanted to go to graduate school, and this was, there were no research opportunities really, and nobody really to provide any guidance. And I, just by luck, really ended up at UT Austin, mostly because I knew who Dykstra was, and I found out that Dykstra was at UT Austin. Well, anyway, I have stories about Dykstra that I can talk about another time. But be that as it may, it worked out, but it was really just luck that it worked out. You mentioned, George, you mentioned the thing about conferences. So CS Rankings specifically has a list of top conferences. So if you go to CS Rankings and you look on the left side, you can click on triangles and it drops down and it shows you some set of top conferences, which mostly reflect a rough consensus from people in those areas of what are the top conferences. And then you can select a particular area, and then you can go and see the faculty who are active and publishing in those things. So I think that from the perspective of sort of efficiently, quickly finding active researchers in specific areas, it's a really good tool. It has links to their home pages and Google Scholar pages and all of these sorts of things. So if you're interested in programming languages, say, you click on programming languages and it'll show you some schools, and then you can go and dive down and quickly find those people. I definitely agree with everybody who said that you're kind of applying to an advisor, not a PhD program in general. It really is advisor centric. So finding the people you want to work with and even getting in touch with them beforehand, I think is a really good idea.
I also like to share my experience. So I totally agree that the financial burden is one aspect. The application fee was pretty expensive, including GRE fee, TOEFL fee, if you're not a native English speaker. Also the application fee, everything add up like $150 per school. But given the financial, if it's not a big problem for you, I would highly recommend apply as many as possible. I assume that you're not sure exactly what you want to do, but if you know exactly this direction I want to take, then I think looking at these professors who are active in this area is really important. But given that if you don't know like what we're gonna do, you just probably know I want to do computer science as a PhD program, then I think it's better to apply as many as possible.
All right, those are all great answers. Let's move on to the next question here. How confident should I be on a specific research interest before applying to PhD programs?
So that's a tough question to answer. I'm going to answer this from the perspective of faculty graduate committees. So in general, the way it works is that the graduate committees, this is my impression, obviously your mileage may vary, but you're basically connecting up faculty with students. And if a faculty member wants to work with specific students and those students want to work with that faculty member, they get connected up, and then there's some sort of a rating process that happens. Again, it varies between schools, but you can see it's very much focused on individual students with individual faculty. If you're just sort of applying to graduate school and you're applying to PhD programs and you haven't really honed in on a specific area, it's just going to be harder to get in. That's just the way it is. because of the nature of the process. Faculty members are looking for students. And it's not that graduate schools are looking for students. It really is faculty centric. So, you know, it's going to be hard to get in, not just because of that structural reason, but also because when you write your essay, if it's sort of like, I like computers and they're neato, you're just not going to get into a graduate program. You do need to have some focus.
And I've seen this consistent pattern over the years where students who don't have a clear enough focus, they're all good. Everybody says, this is a common pattern I've seen in faculty reviews of folders, where faculty say, this person looks good, but not enough detail for me to want to admit them. Right. And then they just fall between all of these tools, and there's nothing wrong with them. There's just nobody who's excited enough about admitting them. And as long as, you know, the program is competitive enough and the faculty have enough choices, they just never make it to the top. Right. It's always somebody else who can admit them. I'm fine with it. And to me, that has become such an anti-pattern that I, unfortunately, these days recommend to students don't apply unless you have a clear sense. And we can talk a little bit about how to get that clear sense. But I would sort of say, if you don't have a specific enough interest, it's competitive enough that probably not great, right? And by the way, it's like being interested in, say, two things can actually work really well, right? Like I'm interested in X and Y, and there's some connection between them. You can actually get the faculty in both X and Y excited about you. The thing I'm talking about is the kind of applicant who says, I'm interested in AI, but I'm also interested in programming languages and computing education, and operating systems is cool as well. It's like the list of the 5 upper level courses they took and they really liked. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't want to suggest that that's bad. That's fine. That's great. I love that you're passionate about it. It's just our focus here is on getting into a graduate program. That's not going to help you that much. At least it won't at Brown.
So I think the kind of tactical advice then that I would give is to like pick 2, right? Don't list 5, pick 2, you know, say why you're passionate about those things, that you really want to work in those areas. And the truth is that once you get to graduate school, you can switch areas, right? You can get admitted by one faculty member, and at least at UCSD and many other places, you can change to another advisor if you don't like that area. And so as a tactical question, like pick some areas that you're, you know, your favorite 2, whatever they are, and talk about those. And then you can kind of explore some more once you get to PhD school. But I think there are also places like we at UCSD, we do have a mechanism for admitting students that are just good. You know, they have strong records, but it's not quite as specific. This happens a lot for people that come out of kind of smaller schools. They don't have a lot of research, so they haven't had as much chance to kind of hone in on something. So I would still apply and just kind of, you know, focus a little bit on what you're saying you're interested in.
I temper that a little bit, Steve, because
Sure.
it may be partly, you know, so at Brown, we very much follow the policy that you can shift areas, and we strongly encourage it if people want to, and we support it, et cetera. But when you're a bit smaller, maybe it's not so straightforward. It's also like, you know, we do not have a lot of TA money. All of our students are RA funded for the most part. Right. So if you have a large state university where most people are on TA money, and then it's like, it really doesn't matter how they're going to get paid for, like the TA money will take care of it. It's a lot easier to sort of do some of that shifting around. The other thing is you can write this essay about the 2 favorite areas, but you know, when it comes down to it, somebody might call you and want to talk to you about your actual interest, right? And so you might make it to the penultimate step, but you might still not be admitted if they call you and then they discover like you're not actually that interested in it. So I would say, like, I sort of agree with you, but I think like this isn't what you said, but I just want to make sure this isn't the impression people get. Don't try faking it. That's not going to work. It's unlikely to work.
One thing to add to this, I think you're about to sign up for 6 or 7 years of intensive study. And so, I mean, it's in your best interest to also think through this a little bit as well. I mean, you don't want to sign up for 6 years of piano lessons and then you've never played the piano before. But the one thing I would like to add to this is it's also fine to be passionate about a problem. Like, I really think, I don't know, I'm just saying, you might say like, it really bothers me that my brother, who is deaf, has trouble interacting with technology. And I want to solve that problem. I don't really know what area per se or algorithm or whatever, but like, if you can convey passion about something, you know, I think that computers are not sustainably designed or something like that. Like, there are programs and ways that actually you could flourish. And so it's okay to be really interested, just like I love operating systems just as an artifact, but it's also fine to be kind of like, I look at computers as a means to an end, and here's the end I'm super passionate about too.
So that sounds great. And I mean, such an application could be amazing, but I mean, really, it would still be on the student to draw the connections so that they're connected to particular faculty members. I don't think that just, yes, we also, like Steve said, we also admit some small number of students who are just so good but there's no room for faculty to hire them. They're like, oh, these are really great students, but I don't have the funding, something. But it's a small fraction of the number of students who we accept. And really, if you're like, look, I want to work on this problem. There's two sides to this. One is like, it could be, wow, that's a really attractive problem, and it is close enough to my domain that I would love to work with a student on it. There's a double-edged sword here, though. Like, if a student is like, I'm totally focused on this particular thing, and you're like, that sounds like a great problem, it's just not one that I plan to work on. I mean, you see this in programming languages quite a bit, where people are like, I want to create my own programming language that doesn't have curly braces, it has square brackets or what have you. And sometimes you're like, these are not problems I'm interested in. And so that's also another challenge. So just saying there's a problem that I'm interested in is not necessarily going to win the day.
But that's actually a thing you could have discussed with them before applying, though. Just to point out, if you had that kind of focus, you could have, and this happens to all of us, I'm sure, right? We get people who write to us, I'm saying really focused on this, and they say, that's not a thing I'm interested in. So let me suggest go work with Emery. He's really great for that, but don't apply here because it's unlikely we're going to work together on that, right?
And having some evidence, just to you take some HCI classes and then you reach out and you read some paper. In other words, like, you want to back that up, obviously, but I think some people have an intrinsic interest in a technology just because they like technology. I would say it's okay to want to be a researcher because you have an intrinsic interest in a particular problem that's facing the real world, and that's okay too. But it's still good to say, well, because of that, I took as many HCI classes as I could, or I took this online course on that, that kind of thing.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So this is another variation of a pretty question we get a lot, which is, in this case, should I get a BS/MS before applying for a PhD? Another question that people often have is, should I get an MS before applying to a PhD?
So I'm going to answer this first, just on the very, very nuts and bolts level. So I'm a first-gen college student, and I had no idea about this, but applying for a master's degree, you're basically, if you get into a master's program, you have just spent $100,000 or something that you could have saved if you'd gone to the PhD program. So don't do it. I don't think that, like, if you can avoid doing it, you should try to avoid doing it.
So just to provide some context for that, that is because PhD students get paid to go to school, but master's students pay to go to school.
Very, 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 very few exceptions.
Very, 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 yeah.
And I completely agree with Emery. It also makes it very hard to get into a PhD program. It's way harder if you have a master's degree than a bachelor's.
Yeah, because the committee
I don't buy that.
To a higher standard.
I don't see that. Sorry, I don't buy that. So we'll have to just disagree on that.
Okay. Yeah, we hold them to a higher standard because they've got 2 more years. You're expecting a lot more. You're expecting evidence like papers, whereas
that may be a difference in, like, we may hold them to a higher standard in terms of what we expect them to know. But if they went to a coursework-based master's, I'm not going to hold it against them that they went to a master's program that didn't immediately suck them into the maw of the paper writing machine. So if you're doing that, you're doing it wrong.
And one other practical thing to consider, I mean, it's perfectly fine to have a master's, but if you get into the PhD program, some classes may not be transferable, especially if you're an international student. You may have some difficulty transferring credits, and every PhD program has some class requirements. So you're not done with classes. You will have to take around, 5 classes and maybe also do a minor during the PhD. So you're definitely not done with classes.
And the requirements will change between institutions.
Yeah.
So I think that there's kind of a clear consensus that you should apply for a PhD if for sure if you want a PhD, and maybe even if you just want a master's. What about for like a BS/MS program? Like maybe you can get a master's degree in 5 years and then go to a PhD.
Why bother?
What was that, Shriram?
Why bother? I mean, look, it makes sense sometimes, right? Like if you're in a special BSMS program, it's somehow really well tuned. Let's say, for instance, you might be able to carry over your undergraduate financial aid, and so you're not actually paying for it. There are some special circumstances like that. Otherwise, just like, why bother, right? I would say only bother getting a master's if there's some reason, like applying with a bachelor's isn't going to do it for you, right? Or you're trying to fail.
Yeah, I mean, I would caveat this as well. I mean, I think that you should always just try for the PhD, but it is competitive to get into PhD programs. And so if you don't get into the PhD programs you want to get into, maybe it does make sense because your background is not rich enough to pursue a master's degree. But understand that most master's degrees make it very difficult for you to get involved with research. So UMass is unusual in this regard, and that it is possible, especially in systems, to get involved in research with a master's degree, but most places just treat it as a cash cow.
But even like Emory, we have a whole research track in our masters, but by the time you get to actually successfully doing the research, our applications have gone out, right? Oftentimes it's the case that you spend 1.5 to 2 years. First year, you're getting prepared. And then like October, you send out your applications. You don't actually have any research to show, even though you're doing it. Yeah, there may be a letter saying this person's on the way. So maybe that's the higher expectation that some people have, but it's pretty unlikely you're going to have published a serious paper by then.
Oh yeah, no, I agree that a publication is unlikely. I mean, if like the best case is you have publication in preparation or in submission, probably. But my point is that, look, yes, you should definitely prefer to go to a PhD program for lots of reasons. There's no reason you should just say, I should go for a master's degree first, unless the PhD thing is not working out or you really do feel that you need more preparation.
I would add one more little bit of extra color here, is that it is perfectly, well, I don't know how prevalent it is, but it's a perfectly normal thing to do to start a PhD program and then leave with a master's. We even have a term for it. It's called leaving with a master's. And so you finish your coursework after 2 years, you can basically submit a piece of paper and you get a master's degree for free. And then you can just leave. If you didn't like the PhD, then you got the master's. You didn't pay for it. And then you can go on and have your career, your wonderful career with a master's degree that way.
And one other thing, like final thing, I think the confusion also comes between maybe the US and European system, because in Europe, it's very common to first go for a master's and then for a PhD. It's the system that does this path. But in US, it's perfectly fine to apply directly from a bachelor's to a PhD program.
I want to share some opinion. So assuming some of the audience is international students, so many people would like to apply for a master's degree in US, go to like a higher ranked school than their local, their university. So for example, the university, the name may be not well known. So many of my friends applied to master's degree because they just want to go to somewhere that's well better known and then apply for PhD. Or those who wasn't exposed to research. For example, there's a very small school, they couldn't have a chance to do any research in computer science. Then they apply to a master's degree. But otherwise, I would strongly recommend to just directly go for a PhD, because master's program is super expensive. Why not spend the money on something else? That's better worth it.
As one alternative to a master's degree, if you're looking for experience, like especially research experience, I've seen some people after their undergrad go for like a research engineer kind of position, where like some faculty will hire sort of like research engineers to help more with like programming activities or helping to run experiments with their research. And so that's a really great way, because you'll probably be on a paper, you'll get experience with sort of the research process, and you get to explore something you might be interested in. And maybe this faculty member will later hire you as a PhD student. And then that definitely helps your graduate application. So that could be something else to look into.
So let's move on to the next question. Thanks for all those answers. Does working on an undergrad research project without producing a publication look bad?
I got feelings, man. I got feelings for this. All right. Look, we have somehow gotten into this like horrible state where everyone is completely convinced that the only way you get into a graduate program is with papers. Okay. it's really important to point out that at the vast majority of quality US PhD programs, getting in and papers are orthogonal. Okay, we reject students who have papers and we accept students who don't have papers, right? The paper, like, look, yes, does being able to list something in that publication box help? We're going to glance at it. We're going to look at where the paper is. Most of the time, the paper may not even be at a venue that's that interesting, right? But even if you have a paper, that's just a starting point. If your statement doesn't evidence that you like actually know what you're talking about, like, I am skeptical about paper. Like, first of all, let me say, I have worked with over 50 undergraduates on research at Brown in 20 years. So I take undergrad research really seriously. But at the same time, I'm also, so it's not a thing against undergrads. I believe deeply in that. But I'm also skeptical when I see somebody with a paper, because I want to know, what did they contribute to the paper? Okay, sometimes they contribute real research. Sometimes they were like just the programmer, the statistician. Sometimes they were on it for kind of like a, participation prize, right? And it could be anywhere in that spectrum. So if I'm going to admit a student, I'm going to talk to them and make sure I understand what they did on that paper. And sometimes like I actually come away unimpressed by it. In contrast, we admit students all the time who don't have publications, but are strong in all the other regards. Why? Because if you did something good in research, it'll get reflected in your letters, okay? And we take those letters really seriously, right? If I get a letter from, people I know, like I know George, I know Emery, right? I know Steve, these are like solid researchers. And if they say this student did like, really good work, I don't care whether they have a paper or not. It is not a substitute. Okay, so for those of you who are like obsessed about this paper thing, this is mostly, there are some small exceptions and other people can weigh in on the exceptions if you want to, but for the most part, this is bunk. Please don't get obsessed with this because you're optimizing for the wrong thing and you probably will end up with a bad outcome on top of all that.
I also want to share something regarding my undergrad research experience. So when I started doing research, that's my third year or say junior year in undergrad. That time I don't really know what to do. So I just randomly pick a project. As I remember, it's something not super exciting, like verification of memory consistency model. But I started learning how to do research. Although that work didn't end up with a paper, but I just realized what is computer architecture about, what is computer systems about, what are the approaches needed to do a research. So in retrospect, I don't think this is waste of time, even if it doesn't have a paper. But just giving me an idea of what research is about. Like, this is what takes to do a research. And I should be expecting hard work in PhD because just a minor, small research project is already hard. And later I do other projects and gradually found what is the real direction I want to go for. So,
and do I want to spend my next 7 years doing this, right? That's the most valuable thing it teaches.
Even if I couldn't, like, say the project says 3 months long, I couldn't last 3 months just doing the project and not long 7 years. It just doesn't make sense. So I think research is more like the procedure is more important than the outcome. And just having experience about what you really like and what you want to spend time, like days and night on, this is the meaning itself just way beyond the paper itself. I know a lot of my friends just aiming for papers when they are my classmates doing the same semester, but I don't think that's the right attitude. I think thinking about what you want to do is more important.
So I just wanted to briefly, so I agree with everything that's being said, but I wanted to add one more thing, which is that, the questioner is like, does working on undergrad research projects without producing any publications look bad? No, but crucially, if you are working on research projects, that means you're probably working closely with a faculty member who's then going to be writing a letter of recommendation for you. And the letter of recommendation is gold, right? That is the currency of the realm, is the letter of recommendation. So what I would say is, if you're going to get involved with a research project, make sure that you're going to have close contact with the potential letter writer, right? So sometimes these things happen where it's like you're a flunky for a graduate student. And then, or there's a postdoc involved who's also not going to be able to write a letter for you. You really do want to be in research opportunities that are going to give you face time with a faculty member so that the faculty member will know you and will be able to write a strong letter for you. That's the most important aspect of this. I mean, of the other things of like, yes, if you're like, oh, I don't like research, well, that's certainly an anti-lesson to have learned. But if you are excited about it, then what you want is the thing that takes you to the next stage.
Next question. How should I approach applying for PhD programs if I've spent time in industry?
Do you mind?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So look, every year I do an info session for Brown undergrads, and here's what I tell them, right? So this is related to the discussion that's been going on in the now closed chat about how do I find areas, and it's related to so many other things we've talked about, okay? This is not going to work for everybody. It's not even appropriate for everybody, but for an awful lot of students, if you're not sure what you want to apply for a PhD on, right? We talked about this. I'm interested in X, Y, Z. I don't know, not really sure. I tell students, go work in industry, okay? And here's why. First of all, you'll actually make some money, right? You can stash away some money. And I know it's insane to say this to a 20-year-old, but you can start a retirement account. And, you know, if anybody understands exponential growth, it's computer scientists, right? And retirement works by compound interest works on exponential formula. So the same amount of money you save between the ages of 22 and 24 comes out much better than saving it starting at 28 to 30. Okay, so first point. Second point, you'll have some money in the bank. You can either pay off your debt, or you can help out a family member, or you just have some more money to have a more comfortable grad school existence. I'm saying all this, I didn't do this. I'm not preaching, I'm not telling you what I did, okay? Because I knew what I wanted to do. But the other thing I tell students is, look, let's say you go to industry, wait till you're actually annoyed, frustrated, angry about something. Okay. And I don't mean angry about it in the sense of like, my boss is an idiot. You can't solve that by going to grad school, right? Like you might get me as an advisor and then you have the same problem again, right? But what you wait till you're like technically annoyed about something, like, God, why are build processes so bad? My Lord, how do I get this vision algorithm? Like I'm getting data from Mars and I can't process it fast enough. I'm really, like George said, I'm really passionate about accessibility. And I'm seeing these blind people who can't program, right? Because the tools are all sucky, right? Or I'm finding, et cetera, et cetera. Wait till you're annoyed about something. When you're annoyed about something, here's all the things that happen. First of all, you have a research direction. Secondly, you can start looking at the research literature and start seeing like, okay, keyword searches, right? Who's doing this stuff? When most of the faculty here applied to grad school, there was like barely search engine, like literally no search engines for some of us, barely a search engine, right? You can search for anything these days. In computer science, you can even find the darn papers, right? Look at the papers. Previously, if you tried to read a paper, it may not have even made sense to you. Now you'll suddenly be able to like, I see what this person's doing. This makes sense. That doesn't make sense. You'll have like fine-grained ability to make sense of these. You'll find who's doing work that's actually interesting. What are the programs to apply to? And when you write that statement, man, that's going to be a statement that's going to have faculty members drooling all over it. Right? Like I've worked in industry, I've seen this problem, I've worked with the following tool suites, here are the things I've found, this is what I'm frustrated about, I've read your 3 papers, right? Not the sort of bullshit, like I read your paper and it was very interesting, like I know it's very interesting, I wrote it, right? Tell me something interesting, more interesting than that, right? But I've read these papers, here's what I don't like about the work, here's where I think you're on the right direction, here's where I think you're going off. That is the dream application. People will be calling you up, asking you how quickly you can start. Okay, and I mean that only loosely metaphorically, right? So when you're in industry, think about using your industrial position to get like a sense of direction. It won't work out for everyone, right? You're in a low-end software engineering job. Maybe you don't want to become a software engineering researcher, but think hard about how you can leverage what you have there.
One other point I would like to make is maybe when you're in industry, there's a slight disconnect from research and academia, right? You may not be up to date with conferences and where people publish and what are the up-to-date problems. So if you're working in a company that has a research division, or there are people within the company that publish, approach them, ask them, what universities are you working with? What people are you working with? And they will guide you through like choosing where to apply is one other direction, right? So that's for me.
Yeah. So this is all really good advice. The one thing I wanted to throw in there as well is that, if you go to industry and you've worked in some applicable field, let's say you want to do systems work and you've worked being a software engineer in systems, this really is super beneficial, right? It's going to help your application and it's going to help you in grad school, right? If you've developed a strong software engineering skill set, it's a huge win, because the fact is that fresh undergrads generally don't have that skill set and it takes them years to learn it. And so it's going to help your application. I mean, this is just, when Sriram is saying this is going to, we see applications like this. I hire students like this all the time, where it's like, I was out in industry, here's this thing that's driving me nuts. This is what I want to work on. And you're like, yes.
Next question. how do I pick a PhD advisor, and do I have to do it before joining the program?
And I feel like this is going over some ground we've talked about, in the sense that, yeah, you don't have to, but having a sense will help a lot. It'll make your application stronger. It'll make your admissions much more likely. And how do you do it? I think George's advice is absolutely right on. Go read papers, right? I found my advisor by looking at a paper that just blew me away. And I said, someday I want to write a paper this good. And this is the person who's clearly going to help me. I haven't written a paper that good yet, but I'm still young. So, so that, like, look at papers that inspire you, look at papers that turn you off, and, splice the plane, find the points on the side of the plane and ignore the points on the other side of the plane.
I mean, so the one thing I would say is, I mean, this is fine for like trying to pick the advisor when you're applying, but when you're actually deciding on where to go for a PhD program, you really want to talk to their graduate students. Like, how else are you going to know what it's like? Talk to the grad students, see what it's like to work for the advisor. What the culture is in the lab. How just, you'll come up with lots of questions, and they will give you lots of, they'll tell you lots of things, and you'll get a good sense of what it would be like to have that person as your advisor. It's a long-term relationship, right? I mean, yes, you can change advisors. You're probably not going to, and we're talking about a relationship of 5 or 6 years. You want to enter into it with your eyes wide open.
And an important thing is, you have the right to do that. And anybody who seems to not want you to do that, run away from them. Okay. Yeah. You have every right to do that. Everybody listening on this call, if you're wondering at all, like, I got somebody send DM, like, can I do X, right? You can do X, whatever the X is, you can do X. Okay. It's unlikely you're going to do something offensive. Ask to do it. And by all means, and if they seem hesitant, like, that's a bad sign.
One other thing I would like to add is figure out the logistics of the programs you are applying to, either by looking at the websites or talking to the students. So, as for example, Georgia Tech, when you join the first semester, you are not tied to an advisor. So you can work with 2-3 different professors, and then by the end of your first semester or even first year, you get to absolutely decide. Other places, you are kind of more tied to a person, and then it's more official to change an advisor. Everywhere there is flexibility to do whatever you want, and you should definitely try to figure out if I can collaborate with this person, if I feel comfortable talking and having weekly meetings with this person. And publications and research also is another aspect, but the interpersonal communication is, for me, is the most important, because this person will be your mentor for the rest of your life, actually.
I just want to point out, because not everyone knows this, but like, if you do apply for school and you get admitted, it's really common to be really chatty, not just with the advisor, with the students. What are y'all working on? What's happening this week? What are y'all doing? Can y'all, adding them to email lists, like going back and forth. It's like you wouldn't move into an apartment on a 6-year lease that you didn't visit or something like that. And so you're not bothering people at all. Like, what are y'all doing? Like, what papers are y'all working on? Are y'all doing this? Can we meet for coffee? Pandemic, it's a little hard, but like, can I talk to some of your recent grads? A lot of times on people's websites, on their CV, it'll list like recent grads. You go on LinkedIn, maybe you can get a free month of that, or you Google them or whatever. And like, that is just doing due diligence. And it's almost a little worrisome when you don't see that. Like, if I had met a student and I never hear from them, and then they suddenly accept, it's like, oh my gosh, they're not doing a lot of research into this. That's a bad sign. So you're not bothering anyone. I just make it clear that you're just, doing the right thing.
All right. Let's, this is another one of the most popular questions we get. How important are various parts of the application? So we've heard a little bit about letters. Letters are the coin of the realm. Good letters are really, really important. What about statement of purpose, GRE, grades, other stuff?
So there's a trend to get rid of GREs for PhDs. We don't have them at UMass. There's a number of schools, at least 30 top PhD programs in CS, that have abandoned GREs for PhDs. So I expect that will cease to be. So the importance is 0. Don't take the GRE. Grades.
Well, check the programs that you're applying.
Yes, of course. Well, they're sending you a signal if they're still sticking with the GRE. Just saying. With respect to the grades, really bad grades are probably a problem. Strong grades in computer science and not great grades in, physical education or theory of, I don't know, pretend nonsense. Those are fine. Trajectory is important. Like if you had a rough couple semesters starting up and then by the end things are great, that's a very good sign. And the other thing is if you had a bad semester, I mean, COVID, of course, everybody will know. You won't have to say anything. All right. You'll just be like COVID and people will be like, got it. But if you had a bad semester or you had a really bad grade, just explain it. Right. Don't try to hide it. Everybody can
Explain
see
it briefly.
Just explain it. Yes,
right.
Of course.
Just say I had a medical problem that caused my fall 2020 to be bad, and people are like, okay, got it. And if everything else looks fine, people are like,
yeah. Statement of purpose, super important, and I'll let other people talk about that.
Just a quick counterpoint on the transcript thing. I mean, I completely agree, and it varies quite a bit. You see you see MIT faculty say they don't care about the transcript. You see other people say they do. I mean, what makes graduate school somewhat challenging is it's very unstructured, and there's not a lot of immediate rewards. And so if you're struggling in an undergrad program with very clear objectives where all the material is provided to you, in my perspective, that's a real bad sign, actually. I mean, that doesn't mean you need a 4.0. I want to be clear, but like, it's like if and again, you're going to see a lot of differing opinions, but it's like, it's strictly harder in a sense to do research. And so it would be good to explain that. And I think just to wrap this up, the statement of purpose, all of these materials tell a story, and some of the parts of the application you get to write, like the statement of purpose. Some parts are kind of baked in, like your grades or whatever, and some parts you don't get to write, like letters of recommendation. But all of them come together, and the whole point is you want to tell a story, and that story doesn't have to be that you're perfect, but it needs to make sense. And where things go really, really bad is if you end up with gaps in your story. Like you say, I had this amazing research project with this faculty member and it changed my life. And then that person doesn't write you a letter, or they say like, oh, they took a class with me. I think they got an A. I don't remember. You're like, well, that's odd. There's a discrepancy here. You know what I'm saying? So it's all about telling a coherent story, and you don't have to be perfect at all, but your story should make sense.
Sure. I mean, I think there's the hidden message behind this question is what should I focus on? I think that one of the things that you should not do is, so I agree with everything George said. And I think that, if you have bad grades, it's just gonna be hard to get into grad school. That's just that simple. And you should consider getting a master's degree or getting a job to buff up your applications. So you actually have some accomplishments. But like, I mean, I've seen applications where they have a 4.0 GPA, but no research experience. This is a mistake. Right, that's the wrong way to optimize. It's way better to have a 3.7 or something and have strong research experience and good letters than to have a 4.0 and nothing.
Or a 4.0 with all the easiest courses, right?
Right, right. I mean, yeah, and if you see, the kid is taking graduate classes, right, that's a good sign. And if it's maybe harder for them, great. But they're showing ambition. They're showing that they're showing drive. So, I mean, we definitely look at transcripts. There's no question.
I just want to add one more thing to the transcript discussion, which is, I want grad students, I like to follow a no drama principle. Something I've noticed as I've done grad admissions, but I was also director of grad studies for our PhD program for a decade. So I've had a lot of experiencing a lot of grad students that were not mine as well, right? And one of the things that's really problematic is because as everyone has said, there are course expectations, right? And sometimes what happens is a student with weak grades, well, that weak grade is going to carry over. Like our courses are at least as hard as everybody else's courses. So they spend so much time struggling to get through their coursework that they never get off the ground in research, or they're spending too many cycles on this. Also, at the end of the day, you're trying to get a PhD in computer science. It's going to require some knowledge of computer science. Now, course grades are not an exact match or predictor or anything else, but they're a bit of a signal, right? If you're consistently getting B's and C's in computer science, you might have trouble inventing new computer science if you've had trouble digesting existing computer science, right? I know counterexamples. Everyone here knows counterexamples. I know a 2.6 GPA who was like the best grad student you can imagine. We all know the counterexamples. We're talking about, as a general rule, we're making statements in generality.
I also want to bring up, what is your opinion on extracurricular activities? I know as undergrads, some of us spend time in organizations, volunteering, administrative tasks.
It's all great, but only this is a thing that American undergrads in particular need to hear. So I think it's a fantastic question, because American undergrad getting in is like full of being able to put together this dossier of what a wonderful human being you are, right? Especially at places like Brown. Grad school, nobody cares. Highest order bit, nobody cares, right? If you've done something actually relevant, like, you know, if you're volunteering as I contributed to like an open source project in some non-trivial way, yeah, that's actually interesting to hear, right? Your undergrad debate prowess, unlikely to be of much help, right?
So one counterpoint to that is just, I agree that like if you're, you know, one thing I would say though is that like there are efforts that help with community building. Some people are involved in, for example, maybe their local ACM chapter or diversity efforts or things like that. And I think that can help be useful. I think if you say like,
I was counting that as relevant, but you're right. I didn't clarify what
it doesn't
relevant.
have to be programming, or you know what I'm saying?
No. Sorry. Yes.
But like if you write like, I love soccer, it's like, well, that's cool. I mean, okay.
We don't need, we're not looking for a goalkeeper this year. So
yeah. Although maybe if you have like a basketball team for your local group, maybe suddenly you're like, hey, we need a center, so that's come on board.
Cricket people, I'd love to get some.
Yeah, so I mean, I will say this. I mean, while I'm not, I mean, it's nice to see people being broad. I think that that's great. But if you see that somebody has really shown leadership, right? It's one thing to be like, I've studied piano for N years. It's like, that's great. You know, that shows something. But if you've shown leadership, like you've led a group, you've had an initiative, you've created something, this kind of thing that you're talking about, community building, that is something that, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's one of those things where it's like, it makes the difference between accepted and not accepted, but it's a positive signal.
All right, we have time for a couple more, maybe.
The next one is really quick and easy, Steve.
Yeah.
The one about, can I transfer? It completely depends on your school. There's no point talking about it generally.
Indeed. So, you can apply to any PhD program anytime you want. So if you want to move to another school, go ahead. But yeah,
I'm interpreting the question as, can you transfer from an MS inside the university? And I'm saying that's really dependent on the institution.
Yeah, very dependent. Any suggestions for a timeline of when you should get started?
Start in the summer before. Start early in the summer, spend the summer putting together your dossier. A badly written statement of purpose is typically one that was written at the last minute. You got away with that for undergrad essays. You don't get away with that for a statement of purpose. Do a few iterations, get people to read them, get a faculty member to read them, right? Get some feedback, you know, take your time, allocate what I tell my undergrads is allocate a few hours every week during the summer, right? Go look at like, you know, or we will sometimes work out like, here are 10 institutions to apply to. Each week, spend like an hour or two reading some papers from that institution, getting to know. Do a little bit of work every week rather than trying to do it all in one chunk and producing like mediocre stuff.
One other thing, give like a good time notice to your recommendation letter writers. And then when we apply, send them an Excel document of the places you applied so that you can track if they submitted and they can also track it.
Or a Google Doc. Yeah, so the only thing, I think the most important detail, that one about warning the faculty in advance, that's huge. That's very, very important. Don't be like 1 week before or a day before, hey, I need a recommendation letter for whatever. That's crazy. That should not be a thing. The personal statement, please, please, please get feedback on it. You know, there's a standard personal statement, which is, you know, my older relative of some kind brought home a computer when I was at a young age, and I was so entranced by the magic of blah, blah, blah. You know, they fall into this form. This is not what we want to hear. Right?
No, it's worse than that, useful. Right? Like you got a computer when you were 5. I never saw a computer I literally never saw one till I was 15. So what did you do so much better than me in 10 years is the question I have.
All right. Here's another reasonably quick one.
So, you're fully funded. Move on.
Yeah. So almost everyone, and there's some data on our website about this, almost everyone in a PhD program has a stipend that covers their tuition and fees, and you get a job of some kind. That's either being a teaching assistant or a research assistant. Teaching assistant means you're helping out with a professor teaching a class. Research assistant means you're getting paid to do the research that's going to go towards your thesis. you will get a financial aid offer when you get an offer when you're accepted. And if it does not say that you're going to have a TA guaranteed funding for probably a year, you shouldn't go there because that is totally outside of the norm. That should be, and we've done a little bit of survey and we'll have some more data on the site eventually. But none of the graduate students that I've talked to have had to take on any additional debt to go and get a PhD. In fact,
so one thing I do want to toss this out there. So, so I had a family when I was a graduate student, and I did get a loan, and so I had a stipend, but it was not enough because I had small children, and they're expensive, turns out. And so I got a student loan, and the student loan amounts that you can take out are larger when you're a graduate student than when you're an undergrad. So just so you're aware. So it's not huge, but it made a difference.
Yeah.
Also, just as another thing, I'd recommend to try applying for fellowships also while you're applying for grad school. Typically, they're sort of requiring the same things. Like you can just use your letters of rec from that. And it allows you like basically guaranteed funding, more flexibility. But even if you don't get it, it's like not a big deal. You'll still be able to be funded.
Harder for us internationals.
All right, well, we are just about out of time. Want to end on time. So thank you, panelists, so much.
Can I just throw a quick comment?
Oh,
Somebody asked me
sure.
a question and I want to, because it's down there also, what form should the interaction with faculty prior to applying take? I just want to quickly say, you are welcome to communicate with faculty, okay? It won't always result in a response. I would say look at faculty pages. Some faculty will say do the follow, sort of go through this ritual if you want to contact me. It's because they get a lot of messages, right? Usually if you do, they will respond. So don't like be disappointed if they don't reply. Like everyone's got too much email these days, but there's no harm in writing. And if you follow a process, if they say something on their webpage, you follow it, there's a much higher likelihood. Please reach out. You can save yourself a lot of money, save a lot of pain, form a mentor, get advice. All kinds of good things can come of it. Feel free to reach out. Not everybody will respond. I said, it's worth a try though. And it's always okay. So the question I got on DM was actually, is there a conflict of interest? No, there is not. I don't know if there is technically or not. Doesn't matter. You can reach out. Just go ahead and do it. Okay.
And try to say something relevant. I mean, we all get lots of these emails.
Short
I
and
read
smart.
all of them. I reply to the ones where it seems like they know something about me and there's some effort there, right? And just to reiterate, don't feel bad if we don't reply. And we definitely don't keep a list of the people that emailed us so that we can, take retribution on you later. Like it's just out of the inbox and gone. So
more likely to want to admit you if you're really good.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you, panelists. Thanks all the attendees for coming. And we'll have a video up of this probably in a week or two. And we will also, I'll post a blog post on the site with sort of, for the other questions we didn't answer, where there's sort of quick answers. I'll just sort of type those up quickly and put those up and try to answer as many of your questions as possible. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone. Hey, good seeing the rest of you. Bye-bye.